The Fort Erie Podcast with Brent Jones. Brent Jones starts now.
Hey, that's me. I'm Brent Jones. I got a great episode for you today. I'm going to be talking with hometown hero and Broadway star Lee Siegel in just a moment, and Lee's going to update us on his latest show at the Stratford Festival, as well as his newest project, New Works Productions. And then joining me a bit later in the show will be Jennifer McCready, repeat guest of the Fort Erie podcast and owner of Lady Luck Photography Studio in Ridgeway. She's got an exciting new project that she wants to share with listeners. We'll be getting to your Byrd Box calls, Fort Erie, of course. Always fun to hear what's on your mind. And we'll also be covering, I should say, some local news stories today. But there was one story in particular that I thought was so important that I wanted to lead this episode with it. And that story is regarding our mayor, Mr. Wayne Redekop, testifying virtually before the House of Commons last week regarding the underused housing tax. Now, I don't usually talk politics on this show. I try to steer away from anything truly controversial because the Fort Erie podcast is supposed to be a feel-good show. It's supposed to just highlight what's good in our community, what makes Fort Erie such a great place to be. But I'm going to make a bit of an exception today. And I thought this story was important for two reasons. One is because it has direct implications for our town. But secondly, I couldn't find any local coverage of this story. Like, maybe I'm a dunce, but I checked all the usual local media outlets where I would expect this kind of thing to be covered, and I found nothing. As a matter of fact, the only outlets I could find covering this story at all were south of the border. They were all from, Buffalo and that area. Now, if you aren't familiar, let me just give you a bit of backstory. The underused housing tax was introduced by the federal government early in 2022, and basically what it is it's an annual tax of 1% on the ownership of any vacant or underused Canadian housing. So vacant or maybe only occupied for a small part of the year. The idea behind this policy was to prevent hoarding, if I can call it that, especially foreign ownership of Canadian homes where you might have folks buying up homes, speculating that the prices would rise, intending to only hold the home, keep it empty, and then later sell it for a profit. This was especially problematic at a time when Canadians had a shortage of housing supply. But by the way, that's still very much the case today, June of 2023. I think it's an understatement to say we have a housing crisis coast to coast in this country. And you can do your own research and look up your own stats, but I have a couple of articles pulled up here I'll share with you. According to the Daily Hive, Canada needs to start construction on 100,000 more homes each year due to the demands expected from immigration. 100,000 more homes each year than we are already currently building. According to this article from Scotiabank, Canada's population-adjusted housing stock is the lowest of any G7 nation. According to CTV News, Canada's household debt is the highest of any G7 nation. And by the way, if you want to guess what makes up the majority of that household debt, if you said mortgages, you are exactly right. Now, you, dear listener, might think the underused housing tax is a really good idea to combat some of these problems. You might think it's a terrible idea, but the federal government's idea here was to penalize people, or I shouldn't say penalize, but discourage maybe people, corporations, foreign entities who wanted to buy up homes and not use them, especially if they are not a Canadian citizen or resident. Now, there was a bit of an unintended consequence to this policy, particularly for our friends south of the border. Let's say a lot of homes, it's no secret that a lot of homes in Fort Erie are owned by Americans and used as seasonal residences, meaning they're only occupied a small part of the year. The owners are not citizens or residents of Canada. And so we have seasonal folks who own seasonal residences in our town who are being hit with this penalty, let's call it. And this is where our mayor comes in. Mayor Wayne Redekop went before the House of Commons to make the claim that this underused housing tax, this policy, that it's bad for our town. And one example he cites is that our local economy as a border town gets a huge boost during the summer months when we have our American friends, family, tourists coming up here to their summer homes. And I can kind of see his point here because the town is a different place during the summer months. We often talk about the influx of folks coming down from the GTA, but it's not uncommon throughout the summer months. It's actually quite common to see American license plates all over the place. Niagara Boulevard, Crystal Beach, Point Avenue. I mean, you see them everywhere. And he goes on in his testimony, he makes the claim that as a border town, many of our local residents and local resident families have a long history or sort of tradition on both sides of the border, kind of South Niagara and Western New York. Now, I'm not going to play his complete testimony. It's like 5 minutes long. You can look it up online, but I will play a clip. Here, just have a listen.
One of my grandmothers was born in the United States, in Buffalo, New York. I can trace my ancestry through my American relatives back to the Mayflower. As a youth, I visited family living in Western New York and associated with many Americans who spend summers with their families in Fort Erie as seasonal residents. The development of friendships and relationships continues to be the reality in what can best be described as our binational region. In fact, it is typical for many who grew up in South Niagara and Western New York to have family and friends on both sides of the international border.
Friends and family on both sides of the border. I mean, sure. Like, I get that. I understand what the mayor is saying. I understand where he's coming from. I get it. But like, my wife is American. She has dual citizenship. My daughter will have dual citizenship. We have friends and family on both sides of the border, and there's no reason we shouldn't go visit them, and there's no reason that they shouldn't come visit us. But where he starts to lose me here in his testimony, where I think things go off the rails a little bit, is when he calls our town a binational region. No, sir. No, not in any way, shape, or form. Fort Erie is in Canada. This is not a binational region. When policy decisions are made at a federal level, they are to be made according to what is best for Canadians, not for Americans on vacation. That's not how any of this works. Now, Mr. Mayor, you might not like this tax, and I may not like it either, if I'm being quite honest, but listening to you as our mayor testify on behalf of people who don't live in our town on a permanent basis, who have no Canadian status, be it residency or citizenship, something about that just doesn't sit right with me. And then the mayor goes on after this clip to point out that approximately 900 homes in the town of Fort Erie are owned by Americans, or roughly 6% of our available housing supply. And you know, from where I'm sitting here as a realtor, I find that concerning. But I also, not just as a realtor, I find that concerning as a local resident. I find that concerning as a parent, especially at a time where I see families struggling to make ends meet. Like, it just makes me wonder whose interests is Mr. Redekop really advocating for here? Is it the family locally that can't afford housing, that can't afford heating, that can't afford groceries? Or is it his American friends and family who are so wealthy that they can afford to own a vacation home in our country? Because it's no secret that more available housing supply in Fort Erie would go a long way to help keep housing prices in check. That's true not just in our town, but right across the region, the province, the country. So, like, Mr. Redekop, are you advocating for the 6%? The 6% who visit part-time? Or the other 94% of us who live here year-round and voted for you? By the way, because last I checked, American citizens cannot vote for the mayor of Fort Erie. Now, look, the ultimate case that he's trying to make here is that this policy is bad, and that there was an economic benefit to having our American friends and family own homes here and come here and spend their money in the summer. But from where I'm sitting, I'm looking at it going, if we had any number of those 900 homes suddenly occupied full-time, year-round, by permanent citizens or permanent residents of Canada, people who intended to live in the town of Fort Erie full time, that will do a lot more in the long run for our local economy than pandering to visitors who are only here 2 or 3 months a year. That's what's in the best interests of the town of Fort Erie. Now, in saying this, I mean no disrespect to the mayor. Okay, he's a politician, he's an elected official. That means he's going to take positions on things, and sometimes I'm going to agree with his position, and sometimes I'm going to disagree. And Mr. Redekop, if he's listening, sir, and I somehow doubt, by the way, the mayor is listening, but sir, if you are listening, you are more than welcome to reach out to me at any time to come on this show and talk more about your position, about why you feel so passionately about this. As a matter of fact, I welcome it. I encourage it. Full disclosure to listeners, I've reached out to the mayor's office at least twice. I think it's been 3 times, but at least twice since I started doing this show back in 2019, and I never even got so much as a rejection letter. I've never got a response. So listeners, I'll turn it over to you. What do you think? Is the underused housing tax a good thing for our town, for the housing market in general? Does it do absolutely nothing at all? Or does it do more harm than good? I'd be curious to get your thoughts. You can leave them on the Byrd Box, 289-599-2973. But for right now, let's get into Fort Erie questions and answers.
Fort Erie questions and answers, based on the Facebook group by the same name.
Welcome to Fort Erie questions and answers. This is the segment in the show where I go through the Facebook group by the same name and pick out any questions that I thought were of particular interest this week. And boy, Fort Erie, you sure did not disappoint. Let's start with this question here from Maggie. She asks, where do you bring a bird with a broken wing? Now, probably the best answer, the one Maggie was actually looking for in the comments, was somebody who recommended Hobbit's Tea Wildlife Refuge. And, if you're trying to help this bird with a broken wing, that's probably the correct answer. But somebody in the comments couldn't resist saying, take the bird to Buffalo Wild Wings. Probably not the answer Maggie was looking for, but that's kind of funny anyway. Kat says, did anyone's lights just flicker? A few people mentioned, there was a telephone pole on fire at Central and Jarvis. Somebody said that the power is completely out here, but if the power flickered and it came back on, I just don't think it would ever occur to me to go in a Facebook group and ask if anybody else's lights just flickered. If the power completely went out, I could see trying to find out if it's the whole neighborhood, the whole town, but lights flicker sometimes. That's just what happens. Lori asks, reliable house cleaner, any suggestions? There were a couple of suggestions here in the comments. Fresh Start Cleaning Company. This person in the comments says Jessica Wisby is your girl. Somebody here says they highly recommend Dream Team Cleaning Niagara. When I list a home, I offer my seller clients a move out clean. Once they've packed and moved, we've got the home sold. I'll have cleaners go in to give the place a once over before closing day, just to try to take something off their plate. Usually the cleaner I use for that is 2 chicks and a mop. That's just my suggestion. You can contact Christy over there and get a quote for house cleaning for sure. Somebody named Cass says, hey everyone, I'm looking for a psychic in Fort Erie, Welland, Niagara Falls area. I've never been, and I'm a bit skeptical of it, but still open-minded. Anybody have any good suggestions for reasonably priced ones? There were a few suggestions in here for, somebody says check out Soulful Energy at the Yoga Dome. But somebody here in the comments, again, couldn't resist writing exactly what I was thinking, which was, well, don't they find you? If they're good. I've always wondered, do psychics know that you're going to call them? Or are they just sitting there? They're like, Brent's going to call me today. I can just tell. And the last question in here came from Stacy Lynn, who says, looking for a local dog groomer with experience grooming golden doodles and bichons. There were a few people that mentioned Jade's Spa spelled SPAW. There was somebody else who mentioned, where is it here in the comments? Doggy Detail in Ridgeway. I don't know specifically about these breeds of dogs, but I take my 2 dogs to stress-free grooming, Wendy Cakebread's grooming studio in Ridgeway. That would be my suggestion. Always fun to see what's on your minds, Fort Erie. Keep the questions coming.
The Fort Erie Podcast.
All right, I am joined right now on the phone by Lee Siegel, musical actor, superstar guy. Lee, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm great, man. What would have been a better title? How should have I introduced you?
Oh, I'm just Lee. I will always just be. I'm just Lee.
You sound very humble, because I think you're probably one of Fort Erie's biggest celebrities, maybe outside of Maddie Matheson. It's like you're right up there.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Like top shelf stuff here. So where are you right now at the time that we're talking?
Right now I'm in Stratford, Ontario. We're about to do a performance of Rent at the festival here tonight.
Now, Rent has been, I think that opening night was at the start of June, wasn't it, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, our official opening, I think, was June 8th, but we had started previews back in April. So we've been, and I started rehearsals back in February, so I've been here for a while.
Okay, so it's kind of almost like you're home away from home.
This year, yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we were talking a little beforehand. you grew up in Fort Erie. You've lived here, 40 plus years, but you must be all over the place then quite a bit of the time.
Yeah, I've been truly lucky. I've traveled from coast to coast in Canada, performing or doing something in the arts from coast to coast and across the world. So I've been a lucky fella.
Well, yeah, I would think. Is this your first time involved with the Stratford Festival?
This is my third season. About 12 years ago now, I think it was. I did my first season. We did Jesus Christ Superstar and Camelot. And then it turned out that our production of Jesus Christ Superstar was being taken to Broadway. So I got to head to New York for a little while. And then a year and a half later, I came back here to do The Who's Tommy. And then just kind of worked across the world for a while. And some people back home may know me from the O Canada A Dinner Theater that used to be in Niagara Falls.
Yes. Now, and you've been involved in a whole, your resume. You got Fiddler on the Roof, Les Mis. You mentioned Jesus Christ Superstar. I mean, what are some of the other big productions you've been involved in?
Oh, wow. Cats, Miss Saigon. I've worked in a lot of great entertainment theaters. I worked in PEI, did the Anne of Green Gables musical out there.
Wow.
It's a big resume. So to ask me that question is, again, I'm a lucky fellow.
Well, I was curious to hear what you'd say. I mean, you've had so many, you've been involved in so many interesting productions, and how, I'm sure this is a question you get all the time, but I mean, how did you get into theater?
When I was a kid, my mom put me in the singing on stage in the church. I was born in Buffalo, New York, but we moved over to Canada when I was like 4 years old. So as you said earlier, I've been here for a long time back home in Fort Erie. But the church we belonged to at the time was in Buffalo. So my mom put me on stage at a very, very, very young age because I used to run around the house singing Tomorrow from Annie, from the musical Annie.
Okay.
Yeah. And I remember being on stage there and could only remember the chorus and singing the chorus repeatedly. But I remember looking out into the audience and seeing their faces and watching them clapping. And I think that was the seed that sprung into what I get to do now, because it's a memory that's never left. And I've honored it along the way.
And when you got involved in some of these bigger productions, I mean, was it kind of a, I don't know if you call that like a natural path. It's obviously a path that I haven't walked on before, but did you go to school for performing arts? Did you end up going to 1,000 auditions? Do you have like that kind of struggling artist story, or?
Well, I'll put it this way. I will say I have a feeling it was meant to be. As I said, when I was a kid, I used to sing Tomorrow around the house like crazy. And for some reason, and I don't know how I knew it and why I knew it, but the chorus of Jesus Christ Superstar. I used to sing that around the house, and I used to drive my parents crazy with that. My mom would be like, "It's blasphemy! Stop singing that." There was a time. And one of my favorite artists, singing artists, is Billy Joel. So when I made my Broadway debut back in 2012, the theater we premiered Jesus Christ Superstar at was the same theater where in 1970s Annie, the musical, opened originally. And it was on 52nd Street in New York City. And one of my favorite Billy Joel albums is 52nd Street. And it also happened to be the same year that they were doing a revival of Annie on Broadway down the street from our theater. So I feel like it was meant to be.
Yeah, the universe has a weird way of conspiring, when it's when certain things are meant to align. Now, you mentioned singing. You obviously act, you dance on stage. I mean, which maybe of those skills comes to you the most naturally, and which one do you have to work the hardest on?
Okay, well, we're going to put quotes on the word dance there, my friend.
Is that the one you have to work the hardest on then?
It's my least favorite of them all.
Okay.
So I would say it's singing, acting, and then moving. I'll use instead of the word dancing.
Okay.
But I mean, this mover made it to Broadway twice, so I can't complain, I guess. But
yeah, you might be you're being a little bit modest.
Yeah, but also to answer your go back to your earlier question, I've also done a lot of auditioning. That the journey may have been fate-led, perhaps, but it didn't come without a whole bunch of auditions along the way.
This maybe is getting a little bit existential, but do you feel like, is that a message that maybe some people need to hear when they haven't found success, maybe in whatever they feel their calling is just yet? That maybe there's just a little more work to do to get there. Or maybe what I'm asking on the flip side of that coin is there, a lot of people might share the dream of wanting to do, say, what you're doing, but, maybe haven't had, made quite the same degree of sacrifice. Is that a fair statement?
There is a lot of sacrifice. Yeah, I've missed a lot. I gave up a lot to do what I did. I missed the final years of my father's life because I was on the road a lot before he passed away. Actually, I was here in Stratford the year he did die, and had to come home after he passed. So there was a lot. Best friends' weddings I've missed. Funerals I've missed. There's a lot of sacrifice, but if it's something you want and you wake up and you go to bed thinking about it, you wake up thinking about it, then you're meant to do it. And I always say this when we give talkbacks at the theater and we're talking to students or even adults who have interest in what we do. I always say there's a moment in your life when you're seconds away from just giving up, when it feels like you've done all you can do. And it's that moment just after when the magic happens.
Yeah.
And you have to make it through that moment. Because when I was here back in 2011, Broadway wasn't even remotely a possibility that I had just gotten to the point where I was like, okay, that's never going to happen. So I'm here, I'm at Stratford. I guess this is the end of the road. I've done it all that I can do. And I was about to give up and do something else. And then we had a meeting one day and I'm like, oh, and by the way, the show's going to New York.
Right.
And it put a fire back inside me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny the way those things align, because one of the things I was looking at before our call is the program for. And by the way, what's your role in Rent? Who do you play?
I am playing Tom Collins, which, if anyone is a Law and Order fan, was originated by Jesse L. Martin, who used to be on I think it was like the late 90s, early 2000s version of Law and Order. But it is a role that I've been dying to play, no pun intended, for a very, very long time.
Yeah. The reason I brought up the program is that you've got a little blurb in there, obviously, as the cast does, and yours says something, and I don't remember the exact words because I don't have it in front of me, but something like, "Hey, you out there in the audience, your turn is next," something like that. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, actually, I started doing that last year. Actually, went into Broadway. My first season, the first time I was on Broadway, they give you like 50 words, and you can only use 50 words. And a lot of people choose to like put their credits or put their big accomplishments. And my first playbill on Broadway was like, I've done a lot in 34 years. Trust me, these are the people I need to thank. And so I enlisted people who I loved and who had a dream of being on Broadway, but hadn't gotten that accomplishment yet, but I wanted to see their name in a playbill. And last year on Broadway, I did the same thing. And I said to the dreamer in the back row, this spot belongs to you next. And the amount of DMs on Instagram and just people that would message me, I had teenagers that their tears just streaming down their face saying, thank you for this message, it inspired me. Or I'd go to the stage door and they'd be like, please sign this, you've inspired me. And so I did it again here because I believe it to be true that the generation of dreamers out there, sometimes, especially in this day and age, we need just a little kick in the butt or just a reminder that it's possible.
Yeah. It's a humanizing experience, I think, because when I go to see a musical, it's you feel sometimes in the audience, if the cast has done their job properly, you feel like you're removed a little bit. You've been taken to another world. So it's a nice kind of humble reminder for somebody there to say, hey, this is all possible. Yeah,
and I also of course, Stratford has a stage door that's kind of tucked away from the audience that we can run in and out of if we don't want to be seen as much. But I have to admit that if someone comes to see the show, I sort of exit through the main lobby at the end of the show. And it takes the audience I laugh because you watch them watch me walk through and they're trying to register if it's me or not, because I kind of leave. I get out of the show really quickly. And they're like, when did you? And then when they clue in that it's me, there's just an outpour of love that comes from them. And I take time as much as I can to spend and sign programs and talk to them. Because again, it's a humanizing experience to remind them, yeah, what you saw was real. First off, we are real people. It's not a TV screen. Two, I love to talk to students and dreamers that want to do it and remind them they can. So the playbill and doing that is just my two ways of reminding people, hey, we're human and so are you.
Well, that's awesome. Now, obviously for folks here at home, in the town of Fort Erie, not everybody's going to be able to make the hike out to Stratford to see you perform this year.
Right.
Are there other ways that people around town here could support your work?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I used to work at the O Canada A Dinner Show in Niagara Falls. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic that we all lived through and survived through, hopefully, that company had to close its doors because of bankruptcy. And at the time, I was a manager of about 40 performers, and I had to tell them on Zoom that they didn't have a job anymore, which was one of the worst feelings in the world.
Sure.
So about 3 or 4 days later, I reached out to some of the artists that were great help, who worked hard, who I trusted. And I said, hey, I want to start a new theater company that's ours. And would you come along for the ride? And if it's successful, we'll bring on more performers and help that way. So we're now into year, I want to say 3, 4. How many years was the pandemic? 82?
Yeah, it feels like it. Yeah.
It felt like it.
Yeah.
So we started a not-for-profit company called New Works Productions, NEWWERX Productions. And we've been, during the pandemic, we did online virtual murder mystery shows. And now we're slowly starting to get back on stage because, well, it costs money and we have to build that bank account. But we're looking at doing some Shakespeare in the Park later this summer. And we perform from Fort Erie up to Grimsby and back, just trying to give a home to artists that want to perform, that want to, because we know there's a lot of talent in the Niagara region and Fort Erie and beyond. And I'll put this call out on your podcast while I'm there. We are looking to diversify. I've said it since day one and we'll continue to say it. We know there's a lot of talent out there and we want to bring them on board. Indigenous, Black, it doesn't matter. We're looking for you. Come find us, please, because we really want to add you to our pot and to diversify the group and show the world what beautiful colors there are. So that's New Works Productions, and we're just continuing to do that for right now. Hopefully, we're looking at 2 big shows by the end of next year that we want to do. Okay. But to get there, we're doing smaller shows along the way.
Now, for anybody who maybe, you kind of put a call out there, how would somebody learn more, follow, get in touch? I mean, should they look you up on social media? What's the best way to?
For New Works, you can go to our website, newworksproductions.com, one word. Again, it's NEWWERX Productions.
Okay.
That's our website. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram at Lee. I think mine is Lee_Siegel. Siegel.
Sounds right.
I'm there. Yeah. So find me, DM us, write us if you want to know more, and we get back to you as soon as we can, and hopefully see how we can put your creativity to work and let people know that one day you might be on the Stratford stage, and I could just say, I knew you would.
Yeah. And is this for all ages?
This is for all ages. Right now, we're doing like teens upwards to any age beyond teens. But we do occasionally have younger workshops for children, younger teen workshops. But right now we're looking at like 16 plus if possible.
Okay.
But to check our website, because you never know when we drop something new. That right now we're doing the New Works Film Challenge. We're doing summer blockbusters, and we put out a call for video makers to join our contest, and we started that today. And I think the Shakespeare in the Park is in late August this year. Nice. So you never know. Just check our website and contact us, and we're happy to give out more information.
That's great. That's great. Well, before I let you go, I got to bring it back to Fort Erie, as I always do,
Of course.
because it sounds like you hear about 10 minutes a year, give or take. But when you do come back to town, I'm curious, what do you like to do to unwind? What are some of your favorite places, whether outdoors or business or otherwise? What are some of your favorite things around town to do when you get home?
Oh, wow. I do make it home occasionally throughout the year, which is great. It's nice to escape. Especially when I was in New York, I loved coming home because it was nice to just chill and to be in a quiet area. What do I love to do? That's a good question. Hop in my car and drive along the river, park along the river, and that's just a peaceful thing to do.
Sure.
I love eating out at Ming Tay's, going to the Barrel. Those were just things that existed when I was a kid, and they're still part of my family tradition.
It's like a sense of nostalgia there, eh?
Absolutely. I love the Barrel, and I love walking in and being like, wow, this place hasn't changed in 40 years.
And it's funny you say that, because every time I go in, I think that about the tablecloths, because I'm sure they're new, they're in pristine condition, but it's like they just keep ordering the same tablecloths. I'm pretty sure, because it's that sense of nostalgia where you go in where you're like, it feels like I'm home,
100%. And the same with Green Acres, which I also love, going out to Green Acres. My parents took me there. We'd go to church when I was a kid, and we'd wait in line on the Peace Bridge when it used to be like a 2-hour line to get back home. And we'd go straight to Green Acres. And I since then have just made that a tradition that I visit Green Acres as often as I can when I'm home. And I love that there are new restaurants and new places to try opening up between Fort Erie and into Ridgeway Coastal Beach. I'm excited to try some more of those incredible places, like 355, 335, 335,
335.
Yes,
335.
I freaking love them as well, and we only started trying them, I'm sorry to say this, but during the pandemic.
Yeah,
because when I was in Fort Erie and had no other place to go, we opened to the menus and went, all right, who's open? And we did a lot of taste testing then, which was great too. We had a lot of, we hit a lot during that time.
It's funny to think of an upside during COVID, because, your heart broke at the time for these local businesses that were just, doing whatever they had to do to survive. But at the same time, there was an upside in that, hey, you tried something new every night of the week if you could, right?
100%. And it also, having had to tell my employees, okay, they didn't have a job anymore, that reminded me that there were other places closer to home in Fort Erie, that there were people saying, hey, you don't have a job anymore. So I looked at my family and said, we need to do what we can to make sure that we help out. So we tried a lot of places during that time.
It was one of those things that was sort of tragic and beautiful all at once, was watching a community, pull together to at least do what they could to support things the community cared about. Well, I won't take up any more of your time, Lee. I appreciate you chatting with me today. And I guess in theater, you say, break a leg, man. Good luck with the rest of the run at Stratford.
Thank you so much. I'm off to do a show in about half an hour myself, so I appreciate it, Brent.
News on the Fort Erie Podcast.
Well, it was a wild night earlier this month in Niagara Falls. A Fort Erie man was arrested and charged with a whole bunch of stuff. Jordan John Apps of Fort Erie, charged with the possession of a weapon for a dangerous purpose, 4 counts of possession of a Schedule I substance, and possession of proceeds of property obtained by crime under $5,000. So, as I understand it, this gentleman was in the vicinity of Drummond Road and Dunn Street, and had this what looked to be a very large capacity rifle that he's kind of playing with. He's holding, he's loading. Officers arrive on scene, guns drawn, take the man into custody. It turns out that this large capacity rifle was actually an airsoft gun. It was not a real rifle, but there were no obvious markings, like there was no orange tip or anything to suggest that. Anyway, once the man was in custody, police searched his vehicle and discovered fentanyl, crystal meth, cocaine, and over $4,000 in cash. And then just to make matters worse, once arrested, they were putting him in the back of the cruiser. Allegedly, he decided to kick 2 officers in the chest. So he's also been charged with 2 counts of assault of a police officer. So sounds like it was a wild night for that guy for sure. Feel-good story from earlier this month. Students from two different schools, 4th grade students, attended Brock University's Goodman Lemonade program. And if you're wondering what that is, it's exactly what it sounds like. These young students are, they go to Brock University for the day. They're split into 2 teams. They're given some cash to purchase supplies, and they are to execute on a business plan plan they developed in advance to sell lemonade, maximize their lemonade profits for the day. The whole thing is an exercise in entrepreneurship. I think this is great. I think more young people need to learn about how to start a business, how to run a business, even how to do your taxes. Schools need to spend more time on teaching those types of skills. You may have noticed last week that there's a couple of closures on the QEW, and unfortunately, I'm about to tell you that those closures are going to remain in effect until the end of the month, until June 30th. The first is QEW Fort Erie bound between Netherby and Bowen. There's a right lane closed. And then QEW Toronto bound between Gilmore and Bowen Road. Again, a right lane closed right up until the end of the month. And if you listen to any other podcast based out of Niagara, aside from this one, you might be familiar with Angels Live in My Town. The guys who are responsible for that show are sponsoring a comedy show at the Sanctuary Center for the Arts this Saturday. You can go online to look at the lineup. The show starts at 8 o'clock p.m. Tickets are $20 in advance or $25 at the door, and doors open at 7 o'clock.
It's Fort Erie's answering machine, the Byrd Box.
This is the Byrd Box. It's Fort Erie's answering machine. You can call 24 hours a day, squawk about anything you'd like, 289-599-BYRD. Now, last week, during the Byrd Box segment, we got a call from a local resident who was complaining about the condition of Fort Erie's side roads. I asked the question, listeners, what is Fort Erie's worst road, worst condition, biggest potholes? And I got a couple of messages this week answering that question. Let's play the first one.
The worst road in Fort Erie, it's got Walden Boulevard. That's terrible.
Yeah, I could see that. I guess it depends what part of Walden Boulevard we're talking about. The part that's sort of east of Concession is not in awful shape, I don't think. But once you go west of Concession, past the Comfort Inn, heading down towards Murdoch, I mean, that's a mess. That is an absolute mess. So yeah, great suggestion. And then our second caller here left a message regarding a street that's actually not too far away from Walden.
The absolute worst street in Fort Erie is Sims.
You can just hear the passion in this woman's voice. The absolute worst street. And yeah, if you don't know where Sims Avenue is, it's basically just off Thompson. It's right across from Walmart, kind of where the old police station is. Just thereabouts. And that is truly an awful road. Every time I drive down there, even in my truck, I feel like my rims are going to get bit. Now, Fort Erie does have its fair share of side roads that are in pretty awful shape. If you want to call in, leave a message, you can vote for the worst road in Fort Erie, but you can call in for any other reason too. Something you saw at the grocery store while you're waiting in line, your favorite, least favorite fast food item. It's totally up to you, Fort Erie. You can call in for any reason you want, even if you want to promote an upcoming community event, that's totally fine too. 289-599-BYRD.
Have something you want to squawk about? Let the whole town know what's on your mind. Call the Byrd Box at 289-599-2973. That's 289-599-BYRD.
All right, I am joined now on the phone by Jennifer McCready, repeat guest of the show. Jen, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. And I'm just clarifying, you're okay with being called Jen, right? Jen is fine?
I honestly tell people just to call me whatever comes out of their mouth easier.
Well, that's
Jennifer, Jen, Jenny, Bluehead, whatever.
That's what comes naturally to me. But, you know, everybody's got their own preference. And when it's written, do you do Jen with one N or two N's?
One.
One N. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you feel there's a right or a wrong way to spell Jen? One N, two N's.
Nope.
Doesn't matter.
Whatever makes people happy.
What about Jeff? J-E-F or J-E-F-F?
FF. Isn't that funny? I've never thought of that before.
I mean, it's, you know, English is full of all sort of these idiosyncrasies. Now, you've been on the Fort Erie podcast previously, and you've got a new project going on that I wanted to ask you about today. Can you tell us what the Zen Body Project is about?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to try my best. It's because it's such a big thing for me to put it into like a small amount of time, and with my big mouth, and I like to talk a lot. Okay. So let's give this a try. So I started the Zen Body Project with my friend Melanie. She is a yoga instructor and also owns a really cool place in Fort Erie called Zen on the Lake, and her yoga place is called Zen Body, or the Zen House Yoga in Niagara Falls. Her and it was an idea that I had a while ago, and I knew once I met Mel that I needed to ask her to be a part of it with me, because she believes and her heart holds the same space for body image issues and struggles like I do.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the Zen Body Project is created to start raising awareness to different struggles that not only women but men as well have in regards to their bodies. I photograph a lot of people, and I have photographed a lot of people in the 12 years of Lady Luck. And so I see and hear a lot of this, and a lot of people don't. So not every woman knows that, other women have a hard time with that little chunk of fat over top of their bra.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't realize that almost every other woman has it as well. And, it's the bellies, because most women, they struggle with their bellies. I shot over 500 women, and I think maybe 5 of them have let me show their belly, or they're confident about it, no matter whether it's plus size or thin or muscular. It's just, we all want to exist in this world feeling good about ourselves and feeling good about the space we're in. And, we all want to feel accepted and worthy and enough. And the Zen Body Project is to show that you aren't alone, and that you have other people who understand, and it's okay. Your feelings are valid.
So
your feelings about yourself are valid.
So sorry to kind of interrupt you there. So the Zen Body Project, then this is tied in with your photography studio, Lady Luck.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So are you compiling photos of body types? Is that the idea, where it's like, hey, here's what other, I guess what kind of medium is this project taking?
So I'll give you an example. The very first project we did last year was the number one thing, which is bellies. We met at Zen on the Lake, which is Mel's cottage, and we had 32 women come in to the cottage singly, and they would walk in, they would sign a form saying it was okay for us to use the pictures. They came into a private room where I photographed every single one of their bellies from neck to the top of their legs.
Okay.
No faces. And it wasn't specific. It was just part of my vision. And it was beautiful because Lauren from the Greenhouse Floral Bar donated flowers for us to have the women hold on to, just to make it extra pretty. My friend Anu from the Crystal Florist brought crystals. And they held them as well if they chose to. And then I photographed their bellies, which we've had. Mel just lost her mom, and she, after the project she was not doing well. So things got, put on pause for a bit, which we know everything happens for a reason. But the end goal is we're going to make a book, because after they had their photographs done of their bellies, they went upstairs to be interviewed by Mel, who is a writer, and she asked them the most incredible questions. And most women left there feeling very happy or, emotional. And yes, the plan is we are going to make a book.
Okay.
Photos. Yep.
Okay. And then for somebody, and I don't know, I'm making assumptions here, but was it difficult to find 32 women that wanted to sign up for something like that? Like, were there reservations, I guess?
Yeah, there was everybody from, oh my gosh, I have to be a part of this, to, I really want to do this, but I'm scared.
Sure.
Because we had plus size women who have been shamed for their belly. We had a woman who was in a car accident who had a huge incision down the middle of her belly. Mm-hmm. And then we had the girl who lost a ton of weight, who has excess skin, which is very she's self-conscious about that, to the woman who has a plus size belly, who's like, I love my belly, to the woman who's been picked on because she needs to eat a cheeseburger, which is, I don't like that saying, but like the stigma around, oh, you have a belly, so you must eat a lot, or you don't have a belly and you're skinny, so you must not eat. You know, it's all about, there's so many things wrapped up in these 32 photos. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's one of our favorite pastimes as a society, right? Is judging a book by its cover.
Yep.
Now, how if somebody wanted to get involved, I assume you're going to do more shoots, maybe different areas. I mean, how would somebody get involved? Would they just reach out to you directly?
Yeah, well, actually, the best way to do that is to follow the Zen Body Project on Facebook and Instagram. Eventually, will be a TikTok. If you follow on that account, I will be posting all of the model calls, I guess you could say, the call out for people for projects, because we did women. Now we have another big project that we're going to be doing in a couple months. It was supposed to happen on Thursday, but my intuition told me to hold off. And then we're going to include men. It's going to be for everybody. Like, it's not just women. So if they follow my pages, it'll all be, the call will be on there.
Well, I do also want to ask you about Ridgeway Box for mental health, which, was something that you spearheaded earlier this year. But just on the topic of including men as well, at the time we're recording this, it's June. I just found out this year is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, something like, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Me either. Well, I'm glad I know now.
Well, you just found out. Okay, see, here I was thinking it was like, this would be a great segue to ask you about it. But, it's one of those things that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of headlines, even though I think there's a pretty good argument to make to say that disproportionate numbers of suicides, overdoses, homelessness disproportionately affects men. Why? And I understand that you're not a licensed counselor, and neither am I. But why do you think that is?
Because I believe men were raised thinking that they weren't allowed to talk about their feelings.
Sure.
That they're supposed to be tough. It's changing. I mean, from I'm 49, so when my era is different, but I think the younger kids are now starting to talk more. And now that it's out there, just like body positivity is for men as well. It's not just for women. And it's one of those things that now is finally starting to get talked about, but it still isn't being talked about. So it's something that needs to, the more we talk about it, the more other people talk about their struggles, the more other people are going to talk about their struggles. It's just one of those things. And that's why Ridgeway Rocks happened. It's no secret that I'm a huge fan of Ridgeway. Saved my life. Living here is just, I love this place very much. And, when I finished my fundraiser last year in July for CMHA Niagara, I knew I wanted to have another one right away. And I wanted to have one of my favorite bands, the Practically Hip, come in. And I wanted it to be a mental health fair during the day to open up the doors for people to come in. And but we did very, very well. And next year is going to happen again. And it's going to get better and better every year.
Well,
I have dreams of having a big one.
two things, if I can jump in. Can you guess? Yeah. Can you give us an approximation of, we're talking about raise a ton of dough. I mean, are we talking $5, $50? How much do we raise?
Well, I'd say we're close to 1,500 or more. With it being the first big event like this, we put out quite a bit of money. We had so many sponsors. The North Shore Flower Farms from Port Colborne, they donated $1,000. We had sponsors from all over the place. We had them in Helping Panda, which is an accessible company that she's in actually in Cambridge. She donated $1,000. We had, a lot of people in the area. I should have wrote this all down because I don't like not missing people. But
no. And I understand. I only asked you to guess, to give an approximation, but I think that's an excellent first time out. And if I understand the event, because this happened back in April, this was like a 1-day festival in Ridgeway, so to speak, to raise money for, the money did go to the Canadian Mental Health Association, correct?
The Niagara branch.
Niagara branch, okay. Yep. And it sort of culminated with, you mentioned the Practically Hip being one of your favorite cover bands, with them performing. Was it at the Sanctuary Center for the Arts?
Yes, at the Sanctuary, which is an incredible place.
It is.
It was perfect. It was my dream place for the event, and I'm glad it all worked out.
And this was the first year for it, and you already got the wheels in motion for it to happen next year, second time around.
Yeah, so I also worked alongside with Sherry Hawkins from Mainly Niagara. She was my event planner. She was incredible, as well as Melissa, who owns the Buddha Fitness Studio here in Ridgeway. So, and then my friend Katie Sneak, who came in and just took over and helped big time as well. It was one of those things I could not have done it by myself. I had the most incredible team alongside me, and we are all revved up to do it next year and to just keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger.
What do you think you would do differently next year? Is there anything that you would do differently next year?
Yes. The one thing, our vendors were incredible. Next year we will have more information for people who are needing to find counselors or help or, avenues. It's because it was so new. I think a lot of people didn't grasp what we were after as far as the vendor portion. I wouldn't change anything, but next year we had somebody walk in with their teenage son and say, I need help. Where do I go? I had my friend there, Amanda from Soulscape Services, who is a therapist, thank goodness, and a few other people there, but I want to have more information, have CMHA there, but also have the wonderful stuff too, because we had massage, we had, a whole bunch of different things, different avenues.
That's such a great thing. And it's interesting to always to reflect back on an event and go, hey, how do we change this in the coming years? And what a great takeaway to say, hey, we had awesome vendors and entertainment, but public perception, it sounds like, was largely that it was a fundraiser, which it was. But at the same time, you're looking at it and saying, hey, we could go a step deeper here and provide more information for people who, are looking for it.
Yeah, my dream really is to have, how they have the Tequila Expo and they have Comic-Con and all that. I want to have a gigantic mental health expo. I want people to pay a small fee to come in just to keep the costs, and it to be one side all information and help, and the other side vendors, and then to have workshops and speakers, and that's my dream. Well, that's my dream.
If anybody can bring the Comic-Con of mental health to Ridgeway, it is you, Jen. I have no doubt in this entire world. Hey, for people who maybe aren't already following you or Lady Luck, how do they follow you? How do they follow you on social?
Just honestly, Lady Luck Photography Studio, and I pop up everywhere.
Okay. Lady Luck Photography Studio. And is there anything else that you want folks around the town of Fort Erie to know before we wrap up?
I just want everyone to know that they are incredible and this sounds really cheesy, I know, but
no, go ahead.
You're incredible for who you are. Keep being yourself. Be kind to people. Right now, there's a lot of not so wonderful stuff going on, and not just in our area, but be kind to all kinds.
This month in Fort Erie history.
The month of June is almost at a close, but I thought it would be fun to do another round of this month in Fort Erie history. Previous episode, we talked about the Battle of Ridgeway, June 2nd, 1866, but I went on the Fort Erie Public Library's local history archive and dug through some stuff from June's past and found this really interesting newspaper clipping from June 22nd, 1892. Now, this newspaper clipping it features a poem of its day called The Future of Bridgeburg. And then what follows after the poem is a critique, I'm guessing from the editor of the newspaper. And what I think is really interesting about this poem, I'm going to read it to you in just a moment, is that it makes all sorts of predictions about what the future of Bridgeburg is going to look like. Now, Bridgeburg, if you aren't familiar, was its own town in 1892. I believe it was 40 years later, 1932, I think it was, that Bridgeburg actually merged with the town of Fort Erie. But today, what we'd call the Bridgeburg area of Fort Erie, that is North Fort Erie. That's Jarvis Street and kind of the old downtown there. So some of these predictions are kind of wild, actually, in the sense that, some of them came to light and some of them were just sort of, I guess, interesting remarks of the day. But anyway, the newspaper clipping begins like this, and some parts are a little difficult to read. It's, this clipping's over 100 years old, right? But it says, on June 22nd, 1892, the late C.S. Scotty Jackson composed a verse on the future of Bridgeburg. A copy of this verse has been in the possession of Mr. W.C. so-and-so, and it is to him that we are indebted for the copy. It follows. All right, so here's the poem. Let's get into it. The first line already makes me laugh. It goes, in 20 years more, if you don't die before. Like, what a way to start a poem, man. Like, I guess life was cold and short and hard in Bridgeburg back in 1892, but it begins in 20 years more if you don't die before. Bridgeburg, you'll see a great town with a bridge to Black Rock where you can drive or walk. Here will live many folks of renown. With a large public hall to accommodate all. The dimensions you'll get from me later. We'll have a good jail, post office as well, customs house, music hall, and theater. Now, I have no idea what existed in Bridgeburg. I'll get back to the poem in a sec, but I have no idea what existed in Bridgeburg in 1892. We'll have a good jail. I don't know, was that the aspiration of the day? Have a good jail in your town. We do have the courthouse on Jarvis. I don't know if there's jail cells in there. There might be. The post office. There is a post office there presently. Whether it was there in 1892 or not, I don't know. Where was this large public hall? Where was it, or where was it supposed to go? I have no idea. If you're a historian, if you know your stuff, call the Byrd Box. Let me know. 289-599-2973. I'm just curious about the customs house, the music hall, the theater. Where were all these items to go in Bridgeburg? I'm not sure. Anyway, getting back into the poem. On the darkest of night, the electric lights will show you the road as you go. Should you be out late and seen at the gate, the next day the whole town won't know. Did they have like a gossiping problem back then? They're like, I saw Freddie. He was out late. The electric lights. I knew it was him. Streetcars galore will run past your door from the market square down to Fort Erie. On these long dreary nights, the glare from their lights will help to make everything cheery. We'll have asphalted streets, sidewalks of concrete, waterworks surpassed not by any, church spires quite a few, fire brigades we'll have too. Wow. I wonder if the firefighters were volunteers back then as well. I don't know. And 2 banks to deposit our money. Well, there are 2 banks. There's still 2 banks on Jarvis Street. So that's something. A council will find that will be of sound mind, who will not always act arbitrary. To their guns they will stand and vote to a man to build a bridge to Amagary. What's Amagary? I don't know what that is. The MC and GT like brothers will be, as they grow every day in relation. For humanity's sake, a tumble they'll take and build a respectable station. I hate to break it to you, dear author of this poem, but that train station, that's been gone for a while. So that's where the poem ends, and I'm going to get to the critique in a sec. And let me just say, if it's the editor or whoever wrote a critique that sort of follows this poem, I'll just say up front, was not a fan of the poem. As the kids would say today, this editor, this person responding to the poem, felt it did not slap, okay? And so here's what follows the poem. It says, from a literary point of view, it cannot be said that the foregoing has any particular merit as a poetic effort. In fact, at times, this verse is not a verse, but a mere jumble of words with neither rhyme nor rhythm. He spells rhythm wrong, but anyway. But if Scotty wasn't much good as a poet, he was a jewel as a prophet. The streetcars, the town hall, and the bridge to Amagary are still air castles, but in other respects, the future of Bridgeburg was a true prophetic vision. Yeah, I would say so, right up until the point that Bridgeburg was no longer Bridgeburg and it became part of Fort Erie. But there are quite a number of things in here that I don't know what things looked like back in 1892, but are certainly true today. There are asphalt streets, concrete sidewalks, there are electric lights. There's no streetcars that I'm aware of. Were there ever streetcars on Jarvis Street? I actually don't know the answer to that. But what a great little piece of history here. Somebody writing about the future that they imagined for Bridgeburg. I wonder if somebody were to sit down today in 2023 and write a poem, whether they're a good poet or not, sort of notwithstanding, and they were to dream of what the future of the town of Fort Erie could look like, I wonder what that poem would say.
TheFortEriePodcast.com.
Just a quick correction that I wanted to make regarding a news story I talked about earlier. In the news segment, I mentioned that earlier this month, grade 4 students attended the Goodman Lemonade program at Brock University earlier this month. What I failed to mention during that segment is that some of those students attending, some of those 4th grade students came from right here at Stevensville Public School. That's what made it a Fort Erie news story, and I totally omitted that detail when I mentioned the story earlier. But that is our show for today. That's the show, folks. Thanks for checking out episode 57. Episode 58 will be on its way. It's coming soon. So if you want to be notified when it's available, subscribe to the Fort Erie Podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Get your voicemail messages in on the Byrd Box. Call 24 hours a day. Any topic, squawk about anything you want. 289-599-2973. Leave a message you want the whole town to hear, and I'll play it right here on the Fort Erie Podcast. Quick reminder, this is the last week to get in the draw for the $50 I'm giving away to Brimstone Brewing. I announced that contest a couple of episodes ago. If you want to get into that draw, have a chance to win $50 to Brimstone Brewing Company, go to theforteriepodcast.com, and click the giveaway link at the top of the page. Of course, if you want to learn more about Lee Siegel's new theater company, New Works Productions, or Jen McCready's Zen Body Project, you can look up either or both of those guys on social media. And if you've not ever got the chance before, I highly encourage you to check out the historic archives offered online by the Fort Erie Public Library. There's a ton of great stuff you can find in there about our town, like that poem I read earlier, The Future of Bridgeburg. I think that's about it, folks. Okay. Stay safe out there. So long, everybody. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the Fort Erie Podcast with your host, Brent Jones. Never miss an episode. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or visit theforteriepodcast.com.